Come on now. Let's try it again. Good afternoon. All right, thank you very much for choosing this over the many other options that you had and joining me on this quick journey to discuss trustable software, open source, and open accountability. My name is John Ellis. I'm with a company called Codethink, based out of Manchester, UK. You can ignore the accent. I truly am European. And I'm here today to actually take you on a journey about trustable software. So let's begin. Architects are known to have said, sleep under the bridge the first night it opens, and we can trust that which we have built. And the idea was that if they wouldn't sleep under the bridge, why should mankind, humanity, trust crossing the bridge? Today, our embedded systems are very much software-defined. That is not a surprise to this audience. But it is a surprise to your executives, to your politicians, likely to your family members. Vehicles, medical equipment, transportation systems broadly, logistics supply chain, even airplanes. Everything is software-defined. Unfortunately, the software code that is in that definition has outrun our ability to reason about the systems. We have hundreds of million lines of code in a modern car, modern systems, easily. We have thousands of components. You might build them. Your partners might build them. You might pull them from open source. And for those of us who operate in the regulated industry, we are expected to be able to keep that which we have shipped safe and operating, for some definition of safe and operating and secure, for anywhere from 15 years in the automotive industry to 30 plus years in the industrial and factory industries. In essence, integration of everything here has become the moment of truth. And how many of us have sat there with our sphincters tight as we push the button, oh my God, please work. Integration is where reality happens, where we bring suppliers the reality of where code comes from. We bring it into a system, and we try and reason about it. We try and construct it. We try and bring it together. We try and hit an SOP, start of production date. And oftentimes, with the best of intentions, we are forced to forget about anything other than start of production. We must not screw up the factory. We must hit our ship dates. So engineers are left to not reason about the ability to worry about SOP and 5 years later or 10 years later. And what happens in that integration moment is unknown dependencies surface. We find regularly non-reproducible binaries. Oh, crap, this built yesterday, but I can't build it today. Or I can build it today, but it doesn't look like it did yesterday. I don't understand what happened. Where did this piece of code come from? It wasn't here the other week. What do you mean you need evidence, Mr. Regulator? My code works. You should just accept it. Software is moving at highway speed. It's moving fast. And unfortunately, failures are propagating faster than our ability to investigate them, to explain them, to prove and remediate them. The result of this is an estimate that is measured in trillions of US dollar in terms of economic loss. In light of that absolutely staggering situation, you have to ask yourself, why do we trust software? Would you sleep under the software that you ship? Because quite frankly and honestly, all of us are guilty of not sleeping under our software and not being willing to sleep under our software. We have the tools by which to try and bring accountability to the systems. But what we don't have, what we lack is trust. We have SBOM, software bill of materials. We have continuous integration. We have updates. We have requirements. We have tests. We have assurance. But what we don't have is trust. Everything we have is fragmented. The result being that companies are left alone to try and traverse the waters and figure this out. And the response that I am offering you today, that the Eclipse Foundation, that Codethink are bringing forward today, and we've been bringing forward over the last 18 months, is what we call the Eclipse Trustable Software Framework. In short form, it's a structured, measurable foundation for building embedded software that can be trusted across open source, closed source, OEMs, regulators, Europe, China, Japan, the US. And what's important and key is it's an open source endeavor. The framework is simple. 6 tenets of trustable software. When we're done with this session, these slides will be made available to you and to anyone else you want. You can also be directed to Codethink or the Eclipse project. And what you'll find is some history there. These tenets didn't just magically appear. The result of very thoughtful thinking in an open source project itself. Almost 10 years ago, the result of Bosch asking the question, could we actually use open source in a proprietary mechanism for safety? Could we use open source to deliver safe product? A group of people came together to start talking about, well, what does it really mean to trust software? The result of that is, in fact, these 6 tenets. Very simple. Provenance. Where does it come from? Construction, changes, expectations, results, and confidence. The goal is that TSF turns trust, this ambiguous word, into an engineering discipline. It's measurable, it's repeatable, it's reviewable. We can reason about it. We can reason about it. The 6 tenets, provenance, know what you are building. Be able to actually trace every component to origin. Be able to capture supplier and open source and even closed source dependencies. Make the supply chain inspectable. Oftentimes we find that while this is very easy to talk about, it is very, very hard in practice. How many of you have actually tried to do hermetic builds? Construction. Deterministic and reproducible builds. For those of you who think reproducibility is not possible, please come and talk to us. It is possible. It doesn't come for free. It requires work. But we can, in fact, make something reproducible. And when we do that, we now have confidence in our construction mechanism. We have confidence in the tool chains and the environments. We have confidence in the factory pipelines that generate and construct the software in question, as well as the evidence that accompanies it. Changes. Controlled change over decades. How many of you have ever lived in fear of touching your software? In fear of touching something that's already been released? Of having to try and convince management to touch something already released? That right there is key evidence that we have failed. We should never be afraid to change that which we have built and shipped. We should be able to reason about that change. We should be able to explain that change. We should be able to reverse that change if necessary. The release integrity concept is continuous. Minute to minute, day to day, week to week, month to month. Not once and done, or once every year, or once every regulator or inspector for the certificate that I received. Define what good means. What does it mean to have good software? What are the expectations I, as an engineer, I, as a company, have about that which I am releasing? Whether it's regarding safety, security, resilience, reliance, performance, it doesn't matter. But what are your expectations that you're making claims against to your company, to your shareholders, to society at large? Have very explicit requirements and constraints, and very clear acceptance criteria for the evidence that underpins the expectation claim that you are making. Results, simple. Prove what the system does. Test verifications, right? Evidence measurable, evidence bound to specific builds. More importantly, because it's software, not just prove what the system does, but prove what the system doesn't. Verify that the system doesn't do what your assumptions are about what the system cannot do. And prove it every single time you hit the return key to do a build. And at the very end of the day, confidence. What evidence do I have that allows me as an engineer or as a company to reason about the trustability, that which I'm about to release? How confident am I that it will not bring harm to goods or people? How confident am I that it will not destroy the enterprise value of my company or those who operate in my ecosystem? How do I support the regulators, assessors, politicians, society, that how I am reasoning about my confidence, they too independently can reason with me? And then ultimately, how do I collaborate with other ecosystems who might want to work with me or who are impacted by what I have done? As you sit here, you're very likely saying, well, yeah, John, that makes perfect sense, of course. Unfortunately, it's not as easy to do, and we know this. And so the Eclipse project is bringing forward this idea of trustable by design, including a fundamental construct about how you actually build and deliver what we just talked about. The idea of construction, the idea of factory as a factory, where we treat the idea of software as equally as we treat the real world of trying to build and construct at scale and speed. And the key shift that we're trying to get across and that we are advocating for is that evidence is generated continuously. My anecdote is every time you hit the return key and do a build, you should be generating the evidence necessary that matches, supports, and validates the claims that you are making publicly. You do not assemble the evidence at the end and hope that your checklist exercise is complete, or that the assessor is asleep and misses that you're missing so much of your evidence. We are advocating in public at the Eclipse SDV project, you heard it this morning, a single integration mainline concept. This is an anecdote for discussion, but this is an idea. And what we are showing here is, on behalf of this project, Codethink has actually demonstrated this in an enterprise at scale for a company trying to deliver safe software to move a vehicle in space at 80 plus miles an hour, 100,000 pounds, and no human being involved. It is doable. It is hard. It is engineering. But it does work. More importantly, it does matter. To be clear, TSF complements. It does not replace how we have historically grown up with our existing standards and our tools. In terms of standards, it is cognizant of and complementary to the functional safety standards that exist, the cybersecurity, IEC or ISO, the quality and compliance demands that we have. In terms of practices, it doesn't introduce anything that good software engineers already know about. Reproducible builds, software bill of materials, provenance, the idea that I actually can make a claim, prove the claim, test the claim, validate the claim continuously. and be able to show it to you in a way that you can consume it. And in terms of outputs, traceable releases, reviewable artifact, assessor-ready evidence, these words, they're everywhere. Also part of TSF. Nothing there is new. Trust is a multi-party problem. The regulators and assessors, generally we have found as Codethink, and again, if you go see history, we've actually gone through this. We have been assessed at multiple different standards, 26262, 61508. And what we have found out is that the assessors basically don't trust you. And until they can trust you, the engineer, the engineering community, the engineering company, they are loath and reluctant, no matter how good your checklist is, to actually say yes. Trust has to be built. The OEMs have learned and built trust directly around an ecosystem of assessors, regulators, testers, companies, the suppliers, and then the open source communities. Collectively, we all distrust each other with good reason, but that becomes friction that we need to eliminate. And so our goal for the Eclipse Trustable Software Framework is trust by evidence at ecosystem scale, not enterprise scale, not country scale, but at the ecosystem scale in which you operate. Now, everything I've been saying, you're like, yep, that makes sense, I'm good, I'm not really learning anything new, and you're standing between me and lunch. So tell me, John, why I should give a damn. Here's the traditional certification approach, and I don't care what kind of cert you want. ISO, IEC, safety, security, quality, I don't care. As a company or as an entity who has something that they want to get certified, you are a company seeking certification. And in the world that we operate today, you call upon assessing companies. Some of them might offer consulting services, but these are the companies who, through ANSI or other certification bodies, are empowered to bless you. To actually say, yes, I have seen the evidence, and yes, it is good enough for the purposes of whatever the standard is that the company is seeking. And that's the key word, whatever the company is seeking. So when you go to an assessor and say, I want my product to be assessed, their first question is, what is the standard? Against what do you want us to assess you? The company chooses it. And then the assessment company works with you potentially consultatively, but ultimately it assesses you. And it continues to work with you until you are certified for that particular product. What is key about this effort? It is governed by contracts, managed by confidentiality agreements, and absolutely, completely opaque. It explicitly prohibits the ability to reason about what you have just built and what you're trying to deliver. The world, society at large, is left to trust the assessor. And I'm sorry, but the trillions of dollars of loss should give us pause for why we should put that trust. So what are we suggesting? A brand new approach where the TSF is in fact what you look to, and it has the mappings for the industry standards that you seek. So again, our company is seeking certification, and they will still go to their assessor, Exeter, UL, TUV, and they will say, I want to cert. I'm going to go after the TSF. I'm going to use the word Exeter right now because that's somebody we've worked with. And Exeter will say, that's great. You want to assess against the TSF. What standard are you actually looking to go against? Oh, I'm going against 61508. They're like, great. Previously, they would have done something under contract and confidentiality agreements in a proprietary way to get you from point A to point B. Today, in open, they're now going to take the standard and the mapping, and they're going to be like, let's work on it in open and get you from point A to point B. And you as a company are actually assessing yourself and certifying against the standard, but through the lens of TSF. Now, to actually deliver on that promise, about 3 weeks ago, Codethink announced that we were in fact doing that. We were taking a Linux-based distribution through, working on a 61508 cert. Because of this journey, we have a baseline safety assessment that says our Linux-based operating system can be used in properly engineered systems up to ASIL D, SIL 3. The TSF practice itself has been certified with Eclipse and Exida. And the return on report is the TSF induces and guarantees a software development process that is in excess to what is required for SIL 3 development. And so we've taken all the mappings and we've made them available under early preview, exactly the mappings that we are going against for our certification efforts. And what is very cool and what our call to action is and what we've been working with the Eclipse Foundation, whether it's the ORC, the SDV project, or others, is that this works for any level of mappings. Tell us your mapping, and we want to work with you. To be clear, the only mapping today available is 61508, but it is open, available under an early preview release, and it will be fully available, fully downloadable, fully usable, fully reasonable once we've actually gotten our control OS through. And so what exactly have we done? What exactly is available? Well, it maps the TSF, all those tenets, those 6 tenets that we went through, it maps them to 61508 and what the expectations are. So where Exida or TUV or UL would have had a proprietary mapping, likely in spreadsheet form, this is now open, public. It is available. It is digital. It is available and consumable, and it's reasonable. We've given evidence templates, our provenance, all of the different tenets for how we show up. And we have built it from real-world integration, a real, absolute effort to bring a Linux distro through so that you could work safely with Linux at a SIL 3 or ASIL D level. So how can you use it? You start today. You can go under the preview and go get it. And you can start today. In fairness, TUV and UL are aware of it. They haven't yet adopted as quickly as Exida, but Exida is very much aware of it, and Exida absolutely would understand if you went to them and said, hey, I want to do something with TSF and 61508. They would know exactly what that meant and how to work with you. You can use it right now to start aligning your tool change, your CI/CD. It aligns. And then more importantly, we want you to bring feedback. We are operating this as an open source project. Multiple different avenues. There are stand-ups, sit-ups. There's a birds of a feather today in a workshop form for some of the changes to the trustable graph that we've learned about. There's a call hosted every second week or every other week where we talk about in-depth what has to happen, etc. This is an active project at active scale, and you're invited to participate. Now, what's really cool as we sit here today, as you heard Mike earlier talk about ORC and the CRA, it's coming. It's really coming. And while we at Codethink started this trustable journey almost 14 years ago, and we started it from a journey of safety, what we have come to realize and now continue to begin to advocate for and evangelize is that trustable tenets 1, 2, and 3, provenance, construction, change, they are universal. They're not safety related. They're a foundation for safety, but they are not safety. They are universal. And guess what? The CRA requires them. So when Mike was talking about the attestation process and the due diligence process, when we are talking about how does a company actually comply with the CRA, what we have been saying in the code and compliance conversations, what we've been saying publicly is the CRA tells you what? It tells you what the EU is expecting, what the Commission is expecting, what they on behalf of society is expecting. And we at Eclipse are proposing that the TSF with the CRA mapping tells you how, shows you how, and helps you deliver the how. So then I ask you, if you would not be willing to do this, and you work in the automotive arena, then shame on you. You should be willing to sleep under your software, especially if you are expecting society to do the same. I welcome you throughout the course of today, multiple TSF sessions, a workshop later this afternoon. Many of my colleagues and friends will be on hand throughout the entire week, available for questions. As I said before, these slides will be made available publicly. I thank you very much for your time, and we'll open it up for Q&A. Oh, come on, you got to have questions. I was provocative on every slide. You got to have questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the...
Oop. Yeah.
It's on?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for the great talk.
Thank you.
So you're talking about certifying a Linux distro. What about a Java-based application?
What about Java-based? Yeah, so the original genesis of all this, I will be very upfront, right, was an embedded arena, highly regulated, with some very specific sort of characteristics. When Codethink came to Eclipse almost 2 years ago and offered to join and then offered to bring all of our work and then do all the continued work in public, one of the outstanding questions was, what about Java? What about other projects? What about Rust? What about other languages? This is language independent. It doesn't require C. It's not dependent on Rust. Where you will see things in provenance is, where are you getting a package? So where did libc come from if you're using C? Where did your Java package come from? Do you understand your dependencies? Are you using an OpenVSX pull, and do you understand what pulls, frameworks, etc.? We don't dictate a language. We don't dictate to you what language you should use, and we don't dictate to you how the language that you're using should or could be certified. That's not what the project's about. Now, if in the course of doing Java certification, there are things that we can learn and make available in open publicly to make it easier for people, then there are avenues for doing that. But those are avenues to make it easier, not to dictate what should be done.
So I understand you're just recompiling the whole stack, the whole dependency tree. Well, just, not just, but you are recompiling the whole dependency stack.
Our company is what?
SSI Schäfer.
Sorry,
or what was the question?
Well, yeah, I'm not following your question.
To be able to reproduce some dependency stack, you need to recompile, basically.
Mm-hmm.
True. So for a Java-based application, to me, as far as I understand, this would mean to get rid of Maven Central, NPM repositories, whatever.
Okay. Again, so there are nuances, and specifically about the Java, if we have to recompile, like there are specifics of language that would be represented in provenance, well, very specifically in construction. We're not worried about that today, but we are acknowledging that there are language uniquenesses that would themselves bring technical challenges that may not have been considered as part of TSF development. And we are encouraging people to come and either contribute or raise the issue or ask for. I mean, Eclipse as a historical entity, right, came about because of Java, came about because of the IDE for Java, right? So it is not lack of understanding. It is what's the biggest need, how does it align, and how do we get through? But there is an absolute understanding that it would be great if all 425 or whatever the number of projects could in fact use Trustable, which would mean we'd have to address what does that mean for Java, etc.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yep. Other question?
I took a quick look before the talk on the GitHub repository, and what I asked myself, so all you've described on a theoretical level, that's clear, but what does the project actually provide? Is it providing tooling? Is it providing descriptions, how to map things, to do things, best practices? I've seen there is some Python in the project. So how would this look in reality?
Yeah, so if you're talking about the TSF project at large, what does it really provide, right? A few things, and I don't have a slide on it, so let me just wax poetically for a second here. First off, it provides a community, and a community of people who are going to reason about software at scale. Secondly, it provides the language for that reasoning and the ability mathematically to reason at a level necessary. 3, it does provide definitions for each one of those tenets. It describes what the tenet is. It deconstructs that tenet as far as we've done the work to date against what we're trying to do, which was to bring a Linux-based distro into the world at SIL 3 or ASIL D. So the idea of provenance against an open source project like Linux, great. Where do things come from? How do we build? How do we construct? How do we do reproducibility? It brings the reasoning that we, Codethink, have done previously, now in public, for why certain choices are made, system D versus init D, how do things work, etc., and the reasoning for that.
In what form do you provide this reasoning? In form
Oh, it's
of
all
text,
it's in
or
YAML.
is it-
Sorry. So the TSF graph has a whole bunch of things we can follow up afterwards, right? All of this is readable, machine readable, human readable, consumable, understandable, allows for you to reason. Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Yes, and we can talk more about where things are at in the project. And if you come to the workshop, like we're going to go through a bunch of stuff at the workshop. If you can make it, that would be ideal where we could go through it. Because again, we're going to even have some of the engineers from the team on available. Okay?
Thanks.
Yeah.
I was wondering, can I do some kind of self-assessment based on that framework? And how valuable would that be for an open source project? Or do I always need these intermediaries, these assessment companies?
So the question being, how could you do it? Could you do self-assessment, and how good or valuable would that be? Do you need to use the assessing ecosystem? Start from the beginning. You can. This is open source. You can deploy this, and as a company, if you're willing to stand up, understand it, and reason amongst yourself and want to do it, you can. If you're a project and you want to do it, you can. The question that would be in front of you is the cost-benefit for trying to do something of this nature. Now, do you have to use an assessor? No, we're not saying that. Not at all. We're just pointing out that there exists an assessment community. Companies have used them for years. They've got trust with those assessors. So what we're suggesting is that there is a way for those assessors to continue to deliver on that trust, but in a very different way, not in this sort of confidential way, but now in a very open way that allows reasoning at scale. In terms of open source projects, there's a current rich conversation happening at the CRA for how we make the ability for a project to do attestation or due diligence in support of, if they wanted, to manufacturers. How is this world supposed to work? This is a very, very rich conversation. Is there a world where maybe they get paid that a project chooses to say, I'm willing to make a very small subgraph related to my project that I stand by, that you could consume in your trustable argument later? All of these are totally doable. They are technically not prohibited, but what is lacking is the business and commercial conversations around them, and those are what's happening at ORC and code and compliance, et cetera. So again, in summary, yeah, you can do self-assessment if you want. We're not trying to say any of that. We're just trying to stop the opaqueness, the confidentiality, NDA-based. The society demands more, and it should demand more. And that's what this is intending to deliver.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I see Johannes Kepler and Johns Hopkins University are participating. I was wondering if there's a larger higher ed or education engagement, and I'm assuming those two are probably working from projects that are coming out of them rather than from an institutional level. So looking at this, I see the industries were automotive, I forget what all they were.
Medical, aviation, anything that's highly regulated, yep.
Well, education, higher ed being highly regulated, I wonder if there's any activity around standards within higher education, student data, all those sorts of things. And then second question, the OSPO Alliance, following up a bit on this question about using this as a tool to assess your own projects. Is OSPO Alliance at all involved with this?
Let me ask the second question first. Octo Alliance, I have heard of it. I'm not gonna overstep myself because I don't know enough about it, but I believe that they are at least involved on the adjacent side of ORC. But they're not directly dealing with us for TSF, but that doesn't mean that they're not aware of it or not participating. So I would hold that back. In terms of education, I'll break it up into two. In terms of education as an industry and being quote unquote certified or regulated or whatnot, we have not thought about that. And we would welcome, if you could come to the workshop, even if you just come for a moment and say, I'd like to open a project related to education, please come. But what we have done with Carnegie Mellon and a few of the other universities is, as part of Provenance, we've begun to realize that supply chain understanding is grossly lacking in software related to embedded or procurement or others. There's just a gross misunderstanding. And most companies have this belief that if I have a specialist in the physical world, with one class, they can become a digital specialist, whatever that might be. And we're trying to create training programs and classes. Western Kentucky University with their supply chain program, Carnegie Mellon and others, coming together to have a conversation about like, how would we teach this? Because it is a legitimate question. If this is so good, why aren't universities picking it up yet? Why isn't it being taught in engineering classes, right? And so we're in this catch-22 early day, but we are aware of that arena and that thread. University City London, London School of Economics, the digital sovereignty movement is happening here, right? I mean, a bunch of stuff from an academic arena is now starting to surface saying, okay, how do we play? How do we participate? Both from how do we teach it, and then how do we use it as a tool? So I would welcome more conversation afterwards. I'll give you the links to the people or to the professors. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, it looks great. But what about adoption? What adoption within Eclipse? This is connected somehow to the governance principle.
Yep.
And which main Eclipse projects are already using or are planning to adopt in the framework?
Yep, so the adoption question is an awesome question. Thank you for it. There are 3 answers to you. With respect to publicly, there are companies publicly that Codethink are working with that we've announced with who are using Trustable to deliver in automotive or transportation space. For the purposes of this recording, I won't talk about it. I can talk to you later, but I can point you to public announcements. Within Eclipse and the project, TSF from the beginning was envisioned because we were coming from a safety arena, and again, this is pre-CRA and full deep understanding, so we put it inside of the SDV project. So the SDV project is in fact using it. You'll hear something from Daniel Krippner later from ETAS, who's talking about how do I take this and bring it in projects that ETAS are trying to do. But more broadly, the Eclipse Foundation is now aware in the ORC, so the Open Regulatory, that the TSF could in fact be the how that companies or entities deliver against the what that the CRA asks for. And so from that standpoint, and it's only been maybe the last since August, where we did our very first idea, we did some mappings initially, we invited people to start the conversation. So it's housed today in SDV, which is using it, but it is now looking seriously from an ORC perspective for the how against attestation or due diligence. Any other questions before we let you go for lunch? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. I appreciate you. Please come see us at the workshop and come see any of the other Trustable stuff. I'll be around for questions here. Thank you.